Hi guys, it's Dan from D1 Fighter Drift Factory here. Just wanted to do a quick video basically showing build tips and some setup. I've been running the chassis now for roughly a month. I've done the Autosport show, that was 4 days solid. I've done quite a lot of driving on polished concrete at Midlands Drift Warehouse. Now, out of the box, obviously the D1 Fighter conversion is a conversion kit for the GRK GS2. Now, the GRK is a good chassis, but there's a lot of improvements that can be made, and D1 Fighter have really nailed it with the improvements that they've made, especially the direct drive steering and the updated battery position. Because as you can see, the motor is now midship and up high, and the battery, I'm running the battery in the furthermost and most upmost position. You can run it on the lower deck, much further forward, and you can also run it the other way around, so it's in line with the motor. But for my personal preference, and I have tested a couple of different options now, I find that running the battery as far back as possible and also upright is much better. It roughly gives, when you get it on the scale, 68% rear weight bias and 32 front, so it's quite comparable with other high-end competition chassis that are on the market when in terms of weight bias. Now, initially I ran the chassis with a solid spool and I had some good results. However, I thought improved traction could be made with running a ball diff or a gear diff. The same as with running any GRK really. So I've now switched to a ball diff and I'm running Reeve D springs all round. I'm running the reds on the back and the fronts are the wound springs that are different depending on which orientation you run them in. I've got them running with the coils, the tighter coils at the bottom. Now, I tend to run this chassis on most tracks on polished concrete or occasionally on P-tile, because that is the most popular in the UK at the moment. And I found this setup works really well. Now, out of the box, obviously this is a conversion, so it doesn't come with any dampers. So I've gone for MST TR56s. Now, I know TR60s are available, HGs, Axons, top lines, but I quite like the MST dampers with a few little tweaks. So they are running overdose X-rings, they're running the standard pistons, but they have been drilled out roughly to around 1mm. And I'm running overdose 10 weight oil in the front and 15 weight oil in the rear. Now, I've got really good suspension travel. It's really smooth, and with the combination of the 15 weight rear oil, that helps to negate the fact that the chassis is quite heavy on the rear axle. Although the chassis as a whole is quite light, the weight on the rear is quite heavy because it's 68% rear weight bias. So the 15 weight oil just really helps dampen and carry the weight of the chassis. I'm also running YD2 rear hubs now and YD2/MD1 rear drive shafts, because as standard the GRK comes with drive shafts and dog bones. Now, there's nothing wrong with running those, but personally my preferred option would always be to run CVDs. I'm running the Yokomo MD1/YD2 rear hubs, just allows for a greater adjustment of roll centre, and also does ever so slightly narrow the rear track width, which just helps make the chassis transition a bit better, be a bit lighter on its feet. So I've run these for a full day now and experimented with all the different holes and different positions, and been having some really good results. And I've also gone for the front track width. So on the front lower arm, I'm just running the standard GRK arm. However, there is a 3mm spacer that I've fitted halfway through. As you can see there, the black spacer in between the two bits of stainless, and this just helps widen the front track width. As you can see, I'm also running Reeve D front knuckles with the top ball joint in the outer hole. I really like this KPI setup, and that combined with running YD2 curved ball ends gives really nice lock, really good Ackerman. You could run more parallel Ackerman, and there is optional with the kit from D1 Fighter. So the steering plate there is an aluminium servo horn with a carbon fibre plate and then a carbon fibre T-piece, as we can see there. And there is 4 holes for different positions. I tend to find that running the suspension ball in the outer rearmost hole gives the best balance of Ackerman and steering feel. However, D1 Fighter do include a separate carbon fibre piece, which to the naked eye does look very similar. However, the holes are drilled in a slightly different place, which again gives different options for Ackerman and angle. But the suspension and the steering really is fantastic. So as we can see, the steering angle is brilliant, and how the steering works in its travel, it's really good. And the biggest limitation, or I would say in my experience, the biggest limitation with the GRK platform is the steering. The standard slide rack, although it works, it has a lot of play and a lot of movement, and that can lead to a slightly numb feeling. And with any direct drive steering system, you just got a greater feel. There's less moving parts, there's less chance of play, and it just works really well. But a slightly better shot of the chassis, as you can see at the back there, the YD2/MD1 rear hubs. And these are a fantastic upgrade, and they're relatively inexpensive, and they work with the GRK standard lower arms. You just have to run a spacer that is roughly 2mm, sorry. And as you can see, the carbon fibre decks with the D1 branding really are a nice addition. Now this piece that runs across, that's got the 3 screws bolted in, this is an optional piece, and this helps to adjust flex. And because the channels are adjustable, the centre one isn't, so if you wanted to run this piece further along, you just wouldn't run the centre bolt, and this would allow for differing levels of flex. I initially tried the car with this removed completely, so maximum flex, and the chassis drove well. However, that combined with the oil I was initially running, I found the chassis had quite a lot of roll. It had good traction, but quite a lot of roll. So I've put the stiffening piece in and put it at its stiffest setting. Now, as you can see, the car still has quite a bit of flex, but it's as stiff as it can be. Now, in terms of electronics, because of the positioning of the major components such as the motor and the servo, you can then position the receiver and the gyro and a capacitor such as a trace, if you're running one, in a very central position. Now when I had this chassis on the scales, it weighed in at 1157 grams, and like I said earlier, with 68% rear weight bias, and the cross weight from the front left to the rear right and the rear left to the front right was within 2 grams. So it's a really well balanced chassis. In terms of front geometry, like I say, I'm running the Reeve D knuckles with a 2mm spacer. The shock absorbers are running in the 6th hole from the outer at the top, and the 2nd hole in from the outer on the lower wishbone. And on the rear, they're running on the innermost hole of the standard GRK wishbone, and on the upper, they are running on the 3rd hole in from the outer section. Now, what comes with the kit, you get the carbon fibre lower deck, you get the carbon fibre upper deck, you get the steering assembly, you get the motor mount, the rear shock tower as well, and a few other bits and bobs, and the battery mount. Now, there is a few shims that you can include, which I've found help with spacing the battery. So as you can see there's 2 standoffs from the upper deck that go from the upper deck to the battery holder, and then roughly around 2.5 to 3mm spacer fitted on top of the motor mount, just to allow the battery to be relatively level. Now if you look, I have got it slightly inclined, and that is when the car squats, it then gets to a relatively neutral point. Now, a lot of people could try this and not really notice a difference, and there probably isn't a massive difference, but it's just an observation that I've made through extensive testing. Now, I've tried different ESC settings. I run Hobbywing D10 motors and XT10 ESCs. I do run the D1 Fighter carbon fibre optional fan cover. Now this isn't a necessity, but it is quite a nice branded item, and the quality and the carbon fibre is a fantastic match for all the rest of the D1 branded items. Now with regards to servo, I do run the D1 Fighter D1 servo. Now this is programmable. There is a programming dongle that is sold separately to the servo, and the software is available as a free download from D1 Fighter's website. And I found, compared to other programmable servos that are on the market, the software is much easier to download. It's quite easy to adjust, and although there isn't as many options for programming compared to other servos on the market, it is a bit more straightforward. And in terms of the smoothness of the servo, with one finger you can lock it over. It feels almost like there isn't any gears, although there is. That's how smooth the servo is. Now, in terms of servo settings, again, these are personal preference and compared to what track and what layout you're running on. Now, if anybody would like to contact me with regarding my personal settings, I'm happy to help and happy to share them. I wouldn't list them on this video because, like I say, they will not be applicable to everybody, and different track surfaces, different tyres. So if anybody would be interested in those settings, I would be more than happy to help. But as you can see, the Ackerman there, it's really nice. Now, starting with the rear, like I say, I'm running the MD1/YD2 rear hubs, and I've got them in the middle row of holes in the second one down from the top. Now this gives quite good camber gain as the car squats, and also because of the camber gain that is gained as the car squats, as the car leans over, it will then lean onto a flat contact patch, which gives really good traction. Now in terms of basic settings, even when I was running the standard GRK knuckles, I was running 2 degrees camber. However, I found running 4 degrees actually increased traction. Now that sounds a bit counterintuitive. The fact that it's on more camber angle, so less contact patch, actually allowed the tyre to heat up more because it was on a thinner contact patch, which then created more grip. And also, because there was less contact patch, the car was lighter on its toes, better to transition. Like I say, the shock absorbers on the back are running 15 weight oil, and they are TR56s. Now, if we pop the shock absorbers off, I can explain some of the settings and some of the length that they have. So as you can see, I'm running the Reeve D springs. Now I'll just pop these off. I am still running the plastic spring retainers. But these are set with very little resistance. There is a touch of rebound, and again this is personal preference, but I found this setup runs really nice. Excuse the dirt on the back there. Obviously I didn't clean them thoroughly enough after the last session, but I'll just pop these back on. And with the front, again we're running the Reeve D springs with the coils, the tartar coils at the bottom. Now this is a recommended setting from Reeve D regarding polished concrete and P-tile, which, as we all know, is the way forward really in terms of surfaces. Now I have tried them the other way around as well, and some people might find that suits them better, but for me personally, I find that having the coils at the bottom changes obviously the spring rate to a slight degree, or in terms of how the spring is controlled and how the damper can control that, and I find it runs really nice. And now for the front geometry, I run roughly 10 degrees camber on the front, and I also run the upper arm in the innermost and lower hole of the 4 that are available. Now I always used to run it in the outermost upper hole, but after seeing some of the infinity roll setups in Japan for the GRK drivers running GRK 4s and GS2s, I found that this setup is what they recommend, and I gave it a go and did a lot of track testing myself, and just found that the front end has much more bite and much more feel. And in terms of the arm positioning in comparison to the lower arm, it's much more parallel, and because of this the bump steer is reduced and the car just felt so much better for it. I'm running a 13.5 turn Hobbywing D10 at the moment. However, I will be switching this to the D1 Fighter branded 10.5 turn to do some product testing at the moment. I've got the D1 wire clamps and the D1 branded heat shrink as a really nice touch. And I also run the JSM Hobby titanium battery connectors. These are a company I've been working with for a little bit now, and the products are really nice. I run these connectors on all of my chassis, and for this one, remaining are mostly all black chassis, I thought I'd spice it up and add a little bit of an iridescent oil slick theme, and for me personally, they look quite nice. Now again, that is all down to personal preference, and multiple colours are available, but these just suited me quite well. I do run the Performer batteries just because of the weight. They're only 125 grams, and running the battery so high up, that will obviously have a massive effect, the weight. So running the lightest battery I could possibly find at the time on the market, which still had a good capacity and good reliability, was a necessity. But overall, the chassis has been absolutely fantastic. In terms of gearing, it's running the standard 78 tooth spur gear and 20 tooth pinion, and it's not got the reduction gears fitted at the moment. I will be trying this just for the difference in gearing and the different FDR ratios that will be available to me, but at the moment it's running the standard gearing just with the ball diff, and the ball diff is set really loose, and it's just been absolutely fantastic. Now I've done multiple track testing now and different setups, and I've been absolutely blown away. The chassis performed miles better than even I initially anticipated, and I knew it'd have good potential. The setup and the weight distribution is very comparable with other competition spec chassis, and although the standard GRK is geared at a more entry level platform, this helps, the D1 Fighter conversion helps to elevate it to a level that most GS2s would not attain to, and it's been absolutely fantastic. Right, thank you for listening, thank you for watching me explain and witter on, but I just thought that I'd give some build tips and some advice, and like I say, running a few extra spacers, running this carbon piece, and the setup for the steering, which can look a little bit complicated to set up initially, but is relatively straightforward. You will need a few extra M3 nuts that aren't included with the kit, and also 46mm front turnbuckles. Now these you might need ever so slightly longer if you're going to run the standard knuckles, but I've always run the Reeve D knuckles with the curved ball ends from the very start, just because I like those knuckles, and they really complement the steering system that has been set up. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned for the next video. Cheers.